Let's get to the business news now with Giles Beckford joining us from our Wellington studio. Giles, another day, another company announcing closures and jobs going. This time, it's Bunnings.
Yes, the big Australian company is planning to close 7 stores around the country, 145 jobs at stake. The stores destined for the axe are Ashburton, Hornby, which if memory serves me right is Christchurch, Hastings, Cambridge, Rangiora, Te Awamutu and Putaruru. Now, they say that there were circumstances really that these stores were struggling, and I think that if truth be known, they were always perhaps thinking that some of these stores didn't have a future anyway, but the COVID-19 pandemic has just made matters worse. They said they looked at such things as locations, leasing arrangements, which means that some leases may have been up for renewal and they didn't want to pay perhaps a higher rate. And they also looked at the turnover for the stores and how they're performing. They're smaller format stores, and so from that point of view, not like the big barns which rake people in and have high turnover. They had already made the decision to close the Putaruru store. So from that point of view, it makes me think that the others may, or some of the others may also have been under threat. 145 jobs at risk, as we say. A prospect that some of the people there will be able to be redeployed in other places. But for the time being, yes, COVID at the very least, should we say, not necessarily to blame, but it's made the situation worse, and these will go. And I don't doubt that we'll see many more of these sorts of announcements from big and small retailers in the months to come.
And it is kind of interesting in the context that it's had, the company, quite a significant chunk in wage subsidies as well.
They have 4,500 staff in the country. They've got more than $27 million through the wage subsidy scheme. So they've supported a lot of workers, but in this case, they clearly weren't willing to try and push that to make these stores survive any longer. Of course, June is the end of the subsidy scheme in its current form at least, and that's when these stores are slated to close.
Giles, what can you tell me about this ultra-fast fibre sale? Who's involved here?
Well, it's pretty tedious, but the big thing that's been trumpeted, especially before COVID-19, everybody was getting so excited about 5G rollout, ultra-fast mobile data. In the blink of an eyelid, you would see your messages, your downloads. You'd be able to sit there and Netflix galore, in the bus. Now, the government had been due to have an auction of the spectrum. It requires a certain part of the radio frequency for the 5G rollout, and that wasn't going to be due until the end of this year. And the government had been a little bit vague about when it wanted to do that. But clearly COVID-19's got in the way. Spark and Vodafone had been toying with an initial rollout, and Vodafone had a little bit of the necessary spectrum sitting on the shelf for a rainy day, and it said, well, goodness me, that's quite nice, let's use this up. So it announced, if you remember last year, rolling out a sort of a half pie 5G in certain main centres. Spark did the same. The government this afternoon has given all the main telcos an allocation for a couple of years at least. Clearly, that will allow it to work out a longer-term solution, a longer-term auction. One of the issues the government has to resolve, and Chris Farfoy's always acknowledged this, which of course is there are iwi rights involved in this. Iwi with a claim to the airwaves, long-established claim that's been recognised, and the government was looking at how to accommodate that within a 5G rollout and this particular spectrum. So it's a makeshift measure, short-term, last until towards the end of 2022, when there'll be a full-on auction.
Giles, before we move to the markets, do you actually watch Netflix on the bus?
No, actually, I've never seen Netflix. Except in reports. I don't have Netflix at home. I know I'm the only person in the country that doesn't.
I've always known you were a rare and exquisite creature, Giles, and that just proves it. OK, what was going on in the markets today?
I always prefer, as Jeeves used to say, I prefer an improving book. The markets, our top 50 index on the share market, up 58 points, just around 10,876, about 0.5%. 6 days in a row we've been on the up, so the market's in reasonably fine fettle. And for the Kiwi dollar, 60.75 American cents, just touching 94 Australian and 49.3 British pence.
Thank you, Giles. That's Giles Beckford, our business editor, with today's business news.